Welcome to another week of the Canadian Premier League Newsroom presented by Volkswagen. I'm back. I'm Charlie O'Connor-Clarke. Mitchell Tierney is back in the passenger seat this week after what I'm sure was a much more enjoyable experience last time out when he
I
was in
didn't get any
charge.
demerit points, so we're good.
No, not one. I listened through and have nothing truly truly rude to say to you, so we're good.
That's good. Yeah, wow. That will
Um,
change at some point, quickly.
Anyway, we'll do a quick wrap up of the CPL week that was here before we move on very quickly to something else to start the show. But just very quickly to start off, we had all the way back to Wednesday. We have to go to begin this week. York United beating Pacific FC 2-0 at home. Friday night saw Cavalry 1, Atletico Ottawa 1, a draw that doesn't really help either team very much at the moment. We'll get into that later. Sunday doubleheader, that was yesterday. We had Forge 2, Valour 1, and then finally, Halifax Wanderers winning at Vancouver FC 4-0, club record for goals in a game. We will get into all of that very shortly. However, we're going to start the show this week with the Canadian men's national team. I know you guys spoke about them last week as well, but since then they have played and lost to, but in admirable fashion, Argentina. Mitchell, let's just talk about, they play Peru tomorrow at the Copa America. What have you liked about what we've seen so far from this team under Jesse Marsch, and just where is your heart rate really heading into tomorrow night against Peru?
Yeah, I mean, what I've liked is the progression that we've seen in all three of the games, in terms of the tactical understanding of what they're trying to do, of again getting the same 11 in back-to-back games, and um, the ability to defend really well against some of the best teams in the world, to pick their moments in terms of pressing. It's not just all out. Maybe was the first game where they didn't quite get everything right, but to better understand their triggers of when to go forward, when to press these teams, and again to have now played three of the best 7 teams in the world and to cause them issues, and doing so again against Argentina. I mean, again, that's a game that could have had a wide number of results in the end. It could have been a 5-0 Argentina win based on the chances. It could have been a Canada win based on the chances that Canada had. And I think 2-0 is probably a fair-ish result. But again, anytime you go toe-to-toe with a top team like that, and you are able to create chances to the degree Canada did, that's a really big positive. Now, again, it's a different test, right? Like, this isn't just about the performance for Canada. The result is truly going to matter in this game.
Yeah.
There is going to be an expectation that they do go out there and get a win against Peru. Again, I don't think certainly they're the favorites against a Peru team that is immensely experienced in CONMEBOL ball, which is different. It definitely is. We've experienced that already, and
Yeah.
on every aspect, from off the field to on the field, and some really, really ugly stuff as well. We've seen, just kind of how different this is. Peru, their experience in it, some of the things you saw in terms of Argentina coming out late for halftime, those little things, like, that's how you win in South America, is using those little things to your advantage. And Peru's going to absolutely, I mean, if you saw Peru-Chile, like, that's what that game was. They're going to absolutely try to use all of these little factors to their advantage. So Canada has to be mentally ready for it. I think the last few games have almost been more about the tactical and the personnel and what we see from that sort of thing. We're really going to find out mentally where this Canadian men's national team is at, I think, against Peru.
Yeah, it is going to be a scrap. I think we've all been impressed by Canada, especially the last 2 games, the Argentina and the France game, at just the fact that there does seem to be the foundations of a tactical blueprint for a team that's been working with a coach for like 2.5 weeks now at this point. Just to see them, kind of clearly going through those patterns in their head and understanding what they need to do is quite impressive, because we know that Jesse Marsch is going to probably give them a lot of information out of some of these games. He is a very detail-oriented manager in a lot of respects, and I think that the fact that they're able to grasp those fairly quickly, or at least the starts of them, is definitely impressive from this team. But going into this Peru game, yeah, you kind of nailed it right there, Mitchell. It is going to be a fight. This is not going to be easy. This is a team that I know hasn't had the greatest run in CONMEBOL World Cup qualifying so far. They sit at the bottom of the table, but it's a team that came very close to qualifying for the Qatar World Cup. They lost on penalties to Australia in the Interconfederation playoffs. Bit of a surprise that they got even into that top 5 of that standing. They've had obviously some changes since then. 2 new managers since then. But Mitch, just from what you've seen from Canada so far, against Argentina, you mentioned that the time for moral victories is kind of over. Is the expectation now, or at least the reasonable hope, to get out of this group?
I don't know about getting out of this group. I won't say that just yet. Again, we have to see it first. Like, we have to see a goal, certainly, from this team. That isn't a shot. Like, they've been creating the chances. Again, they're playing top teams in the world. I think it's absolutely coming. And I think, we've seen from a lot of these players who maybe missed opportunities. Like, we know there's goals in Kyle Larin. We know there's goals in Jonathan David. We know there's goals in Tajon Buchanan. Like, this isn't something where it's not going to come, but we need to see that, and we need to see them perform in a game like this again, where they're not going to be the favorite, but they're certainly it's going to be a lot more even. They're going to have more of the ball. They're going to have to break down a team more so than, getting these opportunities in counter-attacking situations, or just against a team that maybe isn't expecting them to come forward as much. Like, this is going to be a wildly different game. So I don't know if I think, before I can confidently say I think there should be an expectation for Canada to get out of the group, I have to see how they perform in a match like this. I know that's cheating a little bit. I know we always want to be more, cut and dry with these kind of things, but I really need to see how they play against, a team, how they fight against someone their own size, if you want to put it that way, versus, a punch up against a true giant of world football.
Yeah, and it's something we haven't seen under Jesse Marsch yet, right? We've seen them play the Netherlands and France and Argentina, and none of those are evenly matched, I think we would say, in terms of experience and overall quality. So this is a very different game. We'll see if they kind of approach it differently. Obviously, they're looking for that first goal under Jesse Marsch, and I think there are players that are eager to get there. But Mitch, just from what you've seen so far, maybe weighting the Argentina game most heavily, which players have kind of impressed you most, and which do you think maybe you want to see more of in these next couple of games at Copa?
Yeah, I think the players who have impressed me, I think they've really found something with Alphonso Davies at left back, with the Liam Miller kind of cover partnership sort of thing. I think Liam Miller, actually, funny enough, is a player that I think we could see a little bit more of, in terms of maybe just making the right final decision in the final third, and just being maybe a little bit more aggressive. But his play absolutely allows Alphonso Davies to do what he has been doing at both ends of the field. He's been a lot better defensively. Again, we saw that first kind of half or second half against the Netherlands, where they picked him apart. And again, Jeremy Frimpong, world-class player. I don't think that enough was made of how good he was versus Alphonso Davies, versus it just being Alphonso. But we saw in this game, I mean, he was miles better defensively, fantastic in a lot of areas. And then going forward, he was creating chances. So absolutely Alphonso Davies. Derek Cornelius has been a real revelation for this team recently. Bombito too, but I think Cornelius has just been that little bit more assured at the back, showing the quality, which is why he's playing in a top European league right now. Now that he's confident in this system and feels like this spot is his own, I think we're really starting to see him flourish. And just some of the really just smart plays he's been making lately. Again, calm under pressure from some of the best attackers in the world is fantastic. And Steven Eustáquio is always going to be one of those players who in the middle of the park dominates for Canada. In terms of better, I mean, I think everything but in front of goal has been fantastic for Jonathan David. He's been holding up the ball brilliantly. He's been bringing in other players, but again, he's, for a Canada side that maybe doesn't have a tremendous amount of goals in it, you need him to finish a little bit better. So this is a tournament where, Canada getting out of this group could easily be made or broken by a couple of Jonathan David chances. And I think, I think Ismail Kone, again, I just think there's another level to him. I think he was good against Argentina, but maybe, again, just lacked that composure in the final third. Like, this is a player who genuinely is a game breaker for Canada. And I think against a Peru and a Chile, who, again, might afford him a little bit more time and space on the ball, I think we're going to see some absolutely tremendous performances from him coming up. So, and lastly, sorry, I know this went on a little bit long. Tajon, I think is the main one that we need to see a little bit more from. Again, we know this guy can be Canada's best player on his day when he dominates, but he's just a little bit tentative lately. You look at the shot he has in front where he's turning and just shoots it wide. Like a confident Tajon, I think, scores from that position, or at least works the goalkeeper a little bit more. So there's a player who, again, like he's almost at risk with some of the bench players coming in and impacting. Certainly Jacob Schaffelberg of losing his spot in the starting 11. I wouldn't do that just yet, because I think he's a player who's going to be critical to unlocking a Peru. But there's kind of the main player that I think is, hasn't maybe had the start to the Jesse Marsch era that we expected from him.
Yeah, I agree. And it's been, kind of a tough go for him at club level as well. He just hasn't been playing a lot of minutes recently, I think. You kind of got to the question I was going to ask you, though. Like, is there any reason to believe that there are changes to be made? And specifically, Jacob Schaffelberg has been incredible, off the bench twice now against France and against Argentina. But do you think that he's better suited staying in that bench role, or have you seen enough that maybe he should be coming in over, I guess it might be Buchanan at this stage? Probably not, right?
No, but the fact that he did so well on Tajon's side of the pitch, which is not something I don't think any of us were expecting, was immense. Because again, I do think that Liam Miller, Alphonso Davies partnership is so critical. And when Schaffelberg comes onto that side, yes, you get the offensive dynamic at times of the bravery that he provides, but you don't maybe get the tactical cover in the same way that Miller provides. With that being said, yeah, I do think you stick with Tajon for now. I think Schaffelberg is so good because he's coming off the bench, running at tired defenders, and can make an impact that way. Again, if he keeps doing this, like, I don't think you rule him out for a start overall in this tournament, potentially, if he keeps having this performance. But I think right now, like, off the bench is the role where he's going to have the greatest impact. And you want a player like that on your bench, where if things maybe aren't going exactly to plan, like, you can bring him in and know that he's gonna just be direct, create chances, throw something entirely different into the mix. And that's exactly what Jacob Schaffelberg has done so far under Jesse Marsch, and even before Jesse Marsch.
I agree. He's just one of the most fun players, I think, to watch on this team. When he comes on and just drives, just goes forward, route one every time. I think the only other guy that I'm not sure you mentioned that we should shout out is Max Kripo. Who,
maybe just a little bit.
Was insane against Argentina, just outstanding. Made some unbelievable saves on some of the best players to ever play the game, which is pretty good in my book. And I know a lot of people have been saying that if he's not there, then maybe it is a 3-4-5-0 for Argentina. But I would remind them that your goalkeeper is one of your 11 players, and that Argentina would not have won the World Cup without theirs being one absolutely. Of them at several stages, including the very, very end of extra time in the final. So shout out Emi Martinez.
Yeah. So there's where we really worked back to what Charlie wanted to bring up.
Yeah. You made me say out loud something very rude about him, and it made me feel ill on Thursday. So we will not be
trying to rally the boys.
Anyway, Canada, Peru, second game of Group A. Still very, very much alive in this Copa America tournament. That 0-0 draw between Chile and Peru is huge for Canada. Very, very helpful. It means that if Argentina win all their games, which we can't guarantee, but they might, then 4 points would absolutely be enough for Canada to get them out of the group. A win and a draw. So, very much alive, all to play for against Peru. That's Tuesday night at Children's Mercy Park in Kansas City. We will be watching. You can check out all sorts of coverage, preview, and after at campl.ca. Now, back to the usual order of business, Mitchell. the Canadian Premier League also was playing this weekend, including last night. We're going to start in Vancouver with that Halifax Wanderers win. If we get the highlights up here, it was early. It was often from the Wanderers. It was cathartic. I think a huge relief for this team to be playing so free and, finally in game, I think 10 of the season for them, they are in the win column for the first time. Mitch, how much of a relief must it be for this team?
Oh, an immense relief. I think if you were Patrice Geyser and you could have designed a first win of the season in a laboratory, this would be exactly what it would look like. I mean, away from home, they score 4 goals. They keep a clean sheet. They even face a bit of adversity. Dunn goes down injured early, and they have to bring on Dan Nimick, and then particularly the Andre Rampersad red card, which is a moment that we've seen them kind of crumble under before, particularly against Atletico Ottawa when Coimbra gets the red card, and they fall apart a little bit. But this actually galvanizes them. They go out and get 2 more goals. And again, the players who are scoring is important as well. Dan Nimick, we've mentioned time and time again how important he is to this team. So for him to have a confidence boosting performance like this is critical. And then they've needed a number 9 to really step up, and Ryan Telfer does so, gets 2 goals. Just a huge performance from them overall. And obviously now it's about going out and replicating this going forward, but it just really feels like a curse is broken type moment for them.
Yeah, and in pretty emphatic fashion. I think sometimes that is maybe the release that you need, and now pretty much it's all good now maybe for the Halifax Wanderers to say as they move on, and obviously the season is not over. They needed to stop the bleeding very, very quickly. They did now. You mentioned Telfer getting on a score sheet twice. That's really good. That's a player that they needed to get into form, to get confident, to get going. And obviously Dan Nimick missing, I think, 2 games, coming back in to this one, scoring twice, including from the penalty spot. That's very good news. Let's go and join a little bit of the festivities that was in the Halifax Wanderers camp that night and see what their coach, Patrice Geyser, had to say after this win.
The sport we love is probably the most cruel sport there is. You're right. I don't think we've had 1 or 2 games where we've been just poor, but every other game we've been in it. If you think about it, is this our first win, or are we undefeated in the past 4 games? It just depends on how you're looking at the scope. And I've said this, that you cannot take the bad first 6 weeks to influence a good week. I mean, after all, if you work at a bank, you work at any job, if you have not performed well, what you got to do is just do your job, and then the following week and on and on. So I think this has built resilience. It's really made us enjoy football more than ever before, and work harder and harder on the things we need to do. So it has been frustrating when you give up a tying goal in the 110th minute, or 101st minute, sorry, and you give up a tying goal in the 93rd minute, but it makes you go places that we haven't gone to, any of us. So we remain united, we remain dedicated, and we just kept going.
Well, this is the moment now where they show if that is more like the real Halifax Wanderers. They have to go on and they have to continue. They're still 8 points out of the playoffs. They do have a game in hand, but a lot of better feelings, I think, in Halifax this week, and especially just for their first win, not to be, a kind of ugly, grinding, kind of squeak out a result on the road. They came out and they beat Vancouver, who have been a playoff team for the whole season so far, pretty much. They come out and they beat them very convincingly. But what of Vancouver, Mitchell? This is a team that probably outplayed Cavalry in Kelowna last weekend. We're very good, couldn't find the net. Couldn't put any of those chances in, and again this week held off the score sheet, and it goes a little bit worse for them. What did you make of Vancouver this week?
Yeah, I think this was easily their worst performance of the season, and at a time returning home where they've been excellent after basically a month away, they really could have used a big win to build towards that express goal of keeping pace with the top teams in the league. They haven't hidden the fact that it's their goal to stay in the top 3 all year, so that they can, towards the end, really be heavily involved in that race to end up at the top of the table. And these are the games that you look to as critical moments to again keep pace and keep those points up. I don't think they were set up really for success either in terms of their mentality or tactically as well. I mean, the one that has been, I guess, widely criticized is the use of Alan Enyu as a defensive midfielder, player who's just so used to having the game in front of him. So when it was behind and in front of him, he just looked a little bit lost, and that was very quickly changed. And little things like, again, bringing TJ Tahid off early, something they did earlier in the year. I was at York Lions Stadium, and he did that after just 45 minutes, him being Afshin Gotbi. Just for a young player who, again, is still trying to build his way into the professional game, it just didn't seem like the right decision at the time. And, I think it was a sub that at the end of the day almost deflated them instead of adding more going forward. So, this is really a moment of reckoning for this Vancouver FC team that I don't think has had very many of those so far this season. And they've got a Salish Sea Derby coming up against Pacific this week that is going to be fascinating, because I think it's two sides right now that are really reaching a critical point in their season where, there's questions about their identity, who are their best players, all of that. It's going to make for a fascinating match, but Vancouver certainly going into that game certainly lower than they've been in a lot of recent weeks.
Yeah, and bringing Tahid off after 32 minutes, very strange decision, but clearly none of the things that they were trying really worked out for them in Vancouver last week. And as you mentioned, the derby coming up, they have slipped down to 4th in the table, I believe. So, some work to be done in Vancouver, I think, ahead of that derby. But a team that has shown this year that it can respond, and it can definitely get itself up for big games like a derby. All right. Also on Sunday was Forge FC hosting Valour FC at Tim Hortons Field. I was there. The first half, it kind of felt a little bit like it might get ugly. Kwesi Poku scoring 2 goals within the first half hour-ish. The first one, not offside, by the way. Roberto Alarcon just does not step forward enough, and he keeps him onside. And then the second one, shortly after, just being, again, just a poorly managed moment from Themi Antonolu, who just doesn't really notice that Penny Badibanga is coming down his shoulder and going to be able to pick the ball off and again put it into Kwesi Poku's path. But then the second half was, well, maybe not even the whole second half. The last 25 minutes of the second half, Valour really started to feel like they actually had a chance to get something from this game. They scored one, shout out Abdul Banate coming off the bench. It's the first time he hasn't started in months, and he actually scores his first goal this time, which is kind of I think Phil DeSantis was kind of talking about it as a bit of a show of maturity from a young player to not get down by dropping to the bench. But then obviously the final moment doesn't come for Valour. They can't find that chance. They need to tie it up. Mitch, let's start with Forge. Maybe what do you think of them and where they are at the moment? Because again, it is kind of vintage classic Forge in the first half, taking advantage of mistakes, being aggressive, but then letting Valour into the game way too much in the second half, probably, right?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, at the end of the day, I think this was more about getting a win than anything for Forge. Like, I think at the end of the day, the 3 points were the biggest thing. We've seen some really strong performances from this Forge team. We know what they are capable of, and they've proven that. I think it really was about just getting points on the board and building some positive momentum at this stage in the season. I mean, the biggest thing that there is to like about Forge in this game is the continued evolution of Kwesi Poku as a number 9.
So good.
Yeah, we've seen, like, again, we've seen glimpses of different things from him, but this was a really complete performance. His movement was excellent. His reading of the game, you saw on the second goal, he barely, I think he got dispossessed 5 times in the entire match as a striker. Like, he was holding up the ball excellently, bringing in other players into the lineup or into the attack. And when you have so many attacking weapons like Forge, having a player like that who can bring in all of these other players and keep the ball and get it to them in dangerous positions is excellent. But also now we're seeing him finish as well. And the second goal, I mean, that's a confident finish from a player to chip the goalkeeper, kiss the bar like that. Yeah, I think that this was a perfect timing to get this win, and again, ahead of a big moment for them, which is going to the nation's capital and playing against Atletico Ottawa, who, you know, again, if they beat, then it's 2 points from the top of the table with a game in hand, and that's exactly where this club, I think, would want to be at this stage. Well, they probably want to be top, but around the spot where they'd want to be at this stage in the season. So yeah, I think from Forge, again, it was just the 3 points was the biggest thing. And yes, you'd like to see them close it out a little bit better, if you're Bobby Smirniotis, certainly, but the fact that they did, I think, is the overriding positive.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned Poku. It's not just the movement and the goals that he scores. He creates 3 chances in this game. Just a very all-around strong performance and striker. And even when Terran Campbell is healthy, I'm not sure that you can take Poku out of that role anytime soon. Very, very quickly on Valour, Mitch. What do you make of them and how they've been playing the last few weeks? You know, I wrote a bit in the preview about how they do seem to be settling into kind of a tactical identity and a best maybe 12 players that Phil DeSantis wants to use in his team, but you know, they're getting this one felt a little bit like that first game at Tim Hortons Field where they get close, but you know, it's not quite there for them. They can't, the chances don't arrive when they really need them to. They can't finish them. Just what have you thought of Valour in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, again, is not playing full 90 minutes. I mean, they've been starting not the greatest, but also just the errors have been kind of creeping back in. Again, both goals. I mean, all they need to do on the first one is Roberto Alarcon to step slightly forward, and Kwesi Poku is absolutely miles off. And then, you know, they get dispossessed on the second goal, Temi Antonoglu, and you know, again, just errors that when you're playing a team like Forge, you can't afford to make. You go down 2-0. The fight back's good, but for the second straight week, they put themselves in a bad position and have to dig themselves out instead of being more proactive. And I know that's kind of the next evolution Phil DeSantis would love to see from this team. They're the only team in the CPL who's lost all of their last 3. I don't think anyone else has more than 1 loss, as the logjam of standings that we'll see later will show. Yeah. So yeah, they're starting to drop back a little bit again after a few weeks of starting to maybe climb back into contention.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, on to Friday night in Calgary, where the last year's regular season winners, although it feels quite a while away now, hosting Atletico Ottawa at Atco Field. Cavalry get on the board just 2 minutes in, thanks to Toby Warshevsky. But then Atletico Ottawa was maybe surprise effective goal scorer this year, Alberto Zapater, getting on the board to equalize. Mitchell, you were watching this game. Obviously, just tell me kind of what you noticed about it. And specifically, let's start with Cavalry. I think you said it's a club record for draws now in a season. Just, are they at a frustrated point right now?
Yeah, ties a club record for 8, which is, I mean, everything's a tie right now. So that checks out. But yeah, I mean, to kind of put it into contrast of like context of like how big of an impact these draws are having. Like, them and Atletico Ottawa are the only 2 teams this year that have lost just 1 game, but there's 8 points separating them in the table right now, with Atletico Ottawa at the top. They're also, Cavalry, again, drawing matches at home. Like, they're the only undefeated team now, with Vancouver losing at home in the Canadian Premier League, but they have the 6th most points in the CPL at home. Like that's exactly what draws can do to you if you have way too many of them, as you drop back in the standings. Defensively, it's been great. Again, and I thought it was against Atletico Ottawa. Like, the commitment to defending has been excellent, but other than Tobias Warshevsky, no one's scoring for them right now, and that is week over week. You know, you have Akio, Musi, Camargo out. Some of those guys probably for longer term. You need your Leighton Brooks, Lucas Diaz, you know, Malcolm Shaw to really step up and take this opportunity. They need someone other than Toby to start finding goals.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, Cavalry, they've scored 12 goals in the season, so that's fifth in the league. The only team in the playoffs with fewer goals scored is Pacific, who we're going to get to, don't worry. Um, but yeah, you're right. I mean, Cavalry, again, you can see all of the, foundations of how good a team they are in there. It's just that final moment, they're not killing games, they're not, putting teams to bed. They're letting teams back into games, which is a problem and was a problem earlier in the season as well. And I think that's what's going to frustrate them most. And again, they're outside the playoffs technically. Now that said, they're a win from being comfortably in the playoffs, really. So it is incredibly close again, as we'll see later. But definitely getting to a point in the season where they need to start turning these draws into wins if they want to be where they want to be at the end of the season. Speaking of teams who are where Cavalry want to be, Atletico Ottawa are in first place. Maybe not as comfortably in first place this week as they were a week ago, but still 5 points up on Forge. Mitch, just what are you seeing from them? Because I know that maybe the last few weeks we're seeing the confidence maybe start to slip a little bit. They're not playing quite as well as they were in the first few weeks of the year.
Yeah, maybe a bit, but I do still think that this was a positive performance from them for two different reasons. I mean, first and foremost, again, a big thing that they've really keyed on is in 2022, they never lost back-to-back games as they went on to win the regular season title, and they've avoided doing that, getting a draw. And also, I mean, Carlos Gonzalez said after the match he thinks this is the best they've ever performed in Calgary, and I don't think he's wrong. Like they from a match control standpoint, they have 48.8% of the ball. The best they've ever had before in Calgary was 35.56. and like that's the best. So like
Jeez.
they've barely touched the ball in all of those 3-0, 3-1 wins. They just were able to go on the counterattack. In this game, they actually controlled large stages of the game. They had plenty of chances. They concede that goal early. That's really the only really downside is, again, like Nate Ingham said after the match, like you get frustrated when you defend so well for 88 minutes, but it's like that first minute that really
Too late.
Yeah, it's too late. Exactly. So that's the main point of frustration. But from an overall performance, this just showed, I think, the progression of this team. Yes, results wise, they have a big game coming up against Forge if they want to keep this buffer that they've had at the top of the table. But I think if you're looking at the club that should be happier coming out of this one, it's unquestionably Atletico Ottawa.
Yeah, I do agree. I do think that they're still maybe not going to come out of it themselves looking like that or looking at it like that. I know that, we heard from them a little bit after the game of being a bit frustrated, knowing that they've got Forge breathing down their necks and they have to play them next week. Speaking of which, let's actually hear from one of them because I know Nathan Ingham said something to that effect. So let's go to Atco Field and hear from the Atletico Ottawa goalkeeper.
Listen, we're running out of breathing room. Our form the last 4 games hasn't been very good. 2 draws, a loss, and a win. I feel strongly you haven't seen our best football, which is, no surprise. I think 15 new faces this year. We're only, 10, 11 games into the season. I'm happy with where we're at. If you told me at the beginning of the season where we'd be at, I'd be very happy. But that being said, if you told me before the last 4 games how many points we'd get out of it, I'd be very disappointed. So you just got to take it with, balanced emotions and move forward. I felt like the team worked really hard these last couple of weeks. It's been really hot in Ontario. We're battling through that, and it would have been nice to get a win today. I think just because of the work we put in, it would have been a good feeling.
Speaking of Ontario, let's go back there to wrap up the show. Wednesday night is a long time ago. We don't need to necessarily get super into the nitty-gritty of this game, Mitchell. 2-0 York United over Pacific. But we can talk about both these teams kind of and how they have been doing at the moment. Let's definitely start with York because they score twice, Brian Wright and Mo Babuli. Austin Ricci gets sent off in the first half. It doesn't really end up mattering for them. 2-0, that's 2 wins in a row, and they are still unbeaten in 3 games under Benjamin Mora. What is impressing you about York United in the last few weeks?
Well, I think a huge point for this team coming into this season was that they needed to be significantly better at home. and they already have more goals scored at home than they did all of last season, and the same number of wins. So mission almost already accomplished on that, although I know there's a long way left to go there. But for me, this was just a tremendous character display from this York United team. Again, coming off of being the only team in the CPL regular season to beat Atletico Ottawa at the weekend. They return home, and they're dealt a massive moment of adversity when, right after they score their first goal, like minutes later, Austin Ricci gets sent off. And I just love the response from not only the team, but the coaching staff. I mean, I immediately look at the bench, and I mean, it's not a particularly arguable call, so fair enough there. But Benjamin Mora is instantly getting he's called over Brian Wright already. He's talking to Brian Wright. He's like, listen, you're the single striker now. You got to do this, and that. Like, he's already focusing them on, instead of, playing up the moment, it's like, okay, now what? We have a lead. And not only do they hold on to that lead and defend very well and capably, but they go out in the second half, they get another goal. They could have had a third goal. I mean, Mabuli coming off the bench was huge for them. So this is a team right now that's showing belief. And again, early in a new coach coming in, this is huge. This is huge that for Mora to continue to press these guys and push these guys is the fact that they have this base of success, and it's clearly working. So that just adds to the mentality. He's described this as the honeymoon period. So obviously the next steps is, again, when it maybe doesn't work one time, or if stuff goes difficult, how this team's going to respond. But right now, I mean, they're flying. And the fact that, again, they had a moment and a game where things really could have gone off the rails, and they just kept going. Here come the 9 stripes, really.
For real, man. We talked about Forge being 5 points back of Ottawa. So are York right now. And they are going to Winnipeg on Thursday, where they'll have had pretty much a full week of rest, and Valour will have played on Sunday. Mm-hmm. So, there's more points on the table for York United. If this is the form that they're in, I think that they are increasingly becoming a team that nobody wants to play. And I think that's an incredible testament to the work that the staff is putting in, that these players have been doing. I know it's been a weird year for them, obviously, with a coaching change less than a month ago, but the vibe seems high. However, the vibe does not seem high at Pacific at the moment. They go down in this game. They're given an opportunity to get back into it with almost an hour of a man advantage. They do not take it and instead concede again. Mitchell, how worried are you about Pacific, not just from this game, but in general in the way that they've been playing the last few weeks?
Talking to their coaching staff, which they did a lot in the lead up, and their players, like, this is a team that genuinely believes and has aspirations of being a top of the table contender team. They want to win something this year. That's the expectation from them as a club.
Mm-hmm.
A team like that needs to be able to come out after winning at the weekend and provide a similar performance midweek. If they're called upon, it's that consistency that really separates, again, the Yorks, what York did exactly in this game, what Ottawa can do, what we've seen Forge do. So the fact that this just doesn't look like a team right now that is capable of quickly turning around and providing, with all the injuries and all the question marks, of providing, strong performances from week to week. Like their team, we've seen some big highs from them, but we've also seen some lows. And that's kind of the biggest concern for me, is we're never really sure what we're going to see from Pacific FC right now. And they're probably not sure themselves either on what they're going to see game to game. And they weren't up for it at all. They arguably got worse when the red card happened, because I think they kind of almost expected that this was an opportunity for them to get back into the game, but you have to do the work to make that opportunity count. And this was a really, really disappointing week for Pacific Football Club.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's 7 games without a win now in CPL play. Not where they want to be, especially
they beat Valour.
They did beat Valour. Sorry. Before that, it was 6 games without a win.
Yes.
So
7 of 8
of their 7 of 8 without a win. Anyway, still,
I enjoy making those two-footed stat challenges. It's one of my favorite
this
things.
is why I need to not do my stat checking while we're on air. Anyway, but my point is, they're not very long away from playing the Whitecaps in that Canadian Championship semifinal, which is a huge game for them. But the way they're playing right now, I don't think it'll go very well for them. So they don't have a ton of runway to get their form back, just find out a way to score some goals, because obviously you have to win a double-legged Canadian Championship tie. I mean, I guess you don't. You could go 0-0 to penalties, but still, Pacific need to. I'm not quite sure what needs to change here, but definitely the confidence is very low. Somebody, as I think James Merriman has said, somebody has to just take it upon themselves and put the ball in the net, and then maybe they'll start to flow. Maybe the confidence will be back. The belief will be there. Doesn't feel like it's there right now, but again, easy game for them to get up for as well this weekend, playing against Vancouver FC, especially after losing to them last time. Speaking of which, let's kind of start to wrap up the show here. Let's take a look at the standings as we head into match week 12 in the Canadian Premier League. Athletic Ottawa still way out in front, 5 points in front, ahead of the logjam of Forge on 17, York on 17, Pacific 16, Vancouver 15, and Cavalry 14. Really tight in there. Cavalry could win and suddenly be very comfortably up in the playoffs there. Valour and Halifax both on 7 there. It's a bit of a gap, but especially Halifax having a game in hand, it is not necessarily out of reach with 18 games to play for them. Beginning this weekend, let's look at the schedule. Valour on Thursday hosting York United, followed by later that same night, Pacific hosting Vancouver FC at Starlight Stadium. Friday night is Athletic Ottawa hosting Forge FC. And then finally, on Canada Day, the afternoon matinee in Halifax at the Wanderers grounds is the Honey Bet match of the week. Halifax Wanderers hosting Cavalry FC, 4 o'clock local time in Halifax. That's always a fun one. Hopefully they get some sun this time in Halifax. Hasn't often shown itself this season, I think, for them, but maybe a win is enough to bring out the sun in Nova Scotia this weekend. Anyway, all 4 of those games will be available as always on OneSoccer. Check out all of the coverage both before and after at canpl.ca, as well as everything you want to know around Copa America and the men's national team. Obviously, the final group stage game against Chile coming on Saturday, I believe, as well, where I don't think there are any CPL games. So, you guys don't have to split. You guys don't have to split your attentions. You're allowed to go watch Canada play Chile at Copa America. You're okay. I know we certainly will be. Anyway, we thank you all very much for joining us again this week. We will see you next week, probably on Tuesday, I assume, because we have a game on Monday and it's a holiday. But anyway, thank you very much to Volkswagen for sponsoring the CPL Newsroom, and we will see you all very soon.